Welcome, everybody, to our weekly overview. We're starting with Daniel chapter 10. Checked off the ones we've completed, obviously. This week is an unseen spiritual conflict. There's a lesson in this tonight's reading that's going to tell us a little bit about how the world works. And it's going to be something that is in that supernatural realm that you might not get through watching your favorite news programs. We are doing a time shift again. So note we're moving back to this section, chapters 10 through 12, that are really preparing Daniel for the revelation he's about to see. But it's moved us back in the timeline where we've seen uh, the Nebuchadnezzar's reign close off and fall to the Medo-Persian Empire. We're back under Cyrus. And in fact, what's happened tonight in tonight's reading is it's been about 2 years since Cyrus said, all right, all you exiles from Judah who want to go back, you may. And in fact, I'll give you some provisions and let you help. And the book of Ezra kind of picks up on that story and will let you know, what's happening to the people as they go back and they rebuild the wall and they rebuild the temple and they reconsecrate the temple. There's a lot of work that has to be done, but Daniel stays behind. What he sees is a summary of chapter 10. He's about 87 years old. It's been about 2 years since others have started to return. And we're going to see him enter a period of mourning and fasting, but not a complete fast. He's just given up certain kinds of food. And it's all with the goal of seeking understanding for these visions that he's having. In his vision, he's going to see a glorious figure. And there's some debate whether that figure is Jesus himself or whether that figure is an angel. We're going to see an angel specifically named, and you'll see some evidence that I believe that says that couldn't have been Jesus, or this reference to him appearing. Maybe it was Jesus earlier, but it's certainly not him now. But anyway, we'll look at that when we get there. We're going to see a description of spiritual conflict. You know, we can kind of sometimes see something happen in our world, and the question is, what's happening behind the veil? Is something going on with spiritual conflict where good and evil are battling? And we're seeing the results of that on our plane, but something else is going on. And we're going to see Daniel's description of that and give us evidence that absolutely that's how the world is working. He's going to be so overwhelmed by this that he needs to be strengthened, which he is. And then this passage is going to help educate us on what that spiritual warfare looks like in our world. Um, and as we will confidently assert, God's purposes will advance no matter what the resistance is. In those first 9 verses, Daniel is seeking understanding and he puts himself into a period of focus. And that focus, just like the Catholics do and some Protestants do during Lent, is they give up something. And the idea of giving something up is that your normal practice, you're going to, like if your electricity's ever gone out and you walk in a room and you still throw the light switch and you go, oh, shoot, I forgot the power's out. It's habit. So every time you're starting to reach for that bottle of beer or reach for that chocolate bar or reach for something that's considered a extra luxury, you're going to pause and you're going to say, oh, wait, I forgot I gave that up. Why did I give that up? Oh, yeah, it's because I'm preparing to remember what it was like for Jesus to give up so much for me. So, this way of focusing your prayer through self denial is something Daniel's going to manifest for us in this first part of chapter 10. As I mentioned, he's going to see a couple of heavenly figures. We'll be able to see through the reading who we think that is. And again, it's so overwhelming. This chapter and the next are considered so specific, especially chapter 11, that those who dispute the authenticity of the Bible almost cite this and say, look at this. This is so perfect. This had to have been written in contemporary times, not 150, 200 years before the events. It's just too perfect. So they don't see the beauty and the clarity that God can provide in all things. So let's talk about this unseen spiritual conflict in verses 10 to 14. There's going to be a messenger who says, hey, man, I heard your prayer, but I got waylaid by this prince of Persia. And you start to think, what do you mean? You were praying and, a person got in the way? Well, actually, no. A spiritual power who is the prince of this land. In other words, somebody in the background who is kind of um, directing the behaviors of earthly people through influence and through coercion. But luckily, we got a we escalated the issue, and customer service came through with an archangel, Michael. And Michael came through and he pushed through the message. And we got your message, and we're here to help. So we're going to see this called out in those four verses, where God's purpose is going to prevail. But it does reveal that the world you live in does truly have spiritual powers that interact with our earthly experience. Verses 15 to 21, Daniel is so overwhelmed by this news, he needs to be touched with a divine touch so he can be strengthened. In that, he is strengthened, and he's able and getting ready to understand and deliver God's message without any interference. I grabbed the first four verses of chapter 11 for our summary tonight, and we will read those as well, only because this is an example of where a break in a chapter isn't a clean break in a story or in where the chapter ideally would cut off. So we're going to look at those first four verses. This messenger that is strengthening Daniel continues his discussion, and it makes sense to kind of add it here, where he makes that first introduction that we heard a couple of chapters ago about these three kings arising and a fourth one becoming more powerful. And it really matches a historical take some 200 years before the event of Alexander the Great's um, experience, where he was able to um, expand the kingdom of Greece from Greece all the way to India. And when he died, none of his children were able to take over, which would have been customary. But Daniel foretold of that in chapter 11. And in fact, it was his generals who ended up taking over the kingdom. This ruler, if you will, time on the left-hand side, kind of gives us an idea of what's going on when you see Daniel's vision in 10 verse 1. He talks about there being three more kings that are going to arise. Well, they did arise, but not for some period of time. Here's Daniel living in the year maybe 539, and it was another 20 years or so before these kings would emerge. And then he says a fourth king will gain even more riches and will attack and, essentially poke the bear of Greece, or the goat, I should say. That's mentioned in Daniel 11, 2. And then there's this one phrase, and then quite a bit of time elapses from 486 BC all the way down to Alexander at about 330 BC, that he says a mighty king will arise and rule with great authority. And that's just an idea of how the quick summary given by a spiritual being can really have a impact on what we see. There was hundreds of years before it occurred, but it was all called out exactly as would unfold, and is corroborated with extra biblical sources. So that's what we're going to be seeing tonight. One quick slide on Alexander, just so you can appreciate what that territory looked like. You can see the area that we would call Iraq today, or excuse me, Iran today. Here's the Persian Gulf. Here's the infamous Strait of Hormuz that all of us can probably point to now, thanks to the current ongoing struggles in the world. But look at the kingdom of who owned it. This was Seleucus and Ptolemy and some of the other names listed here, occurring about 300 BC, so almost 200 years into the future, according to Daniel. But it was Alexander who did the territory expansion. He's the one we have to thank for the spread of the Greek culture, or the Hellenistic culture, where everybody could speak that common Greek, and the entire New Testament was written in Greek. And it was the Septuagint, the 70 uh, um, Jewish elders who decided, you know what, our people are starting to forget Hebrew. Let's rewrite the Old Testament in modern Greek. And that gives us a wonderful Rosetta Stone, if you will, comparing the old Hebrew to the new Greek. So we have both the original transcripts and the translation into Greek of the Old Testament. Those four empires were formed after Alexander died at age 32, and with a benefit to the Christian explosion across the country in those 200 years from the time that Jesus died, was resurrected, until Constantine, the emperor of Rome, declared Christianity the official religion of Rome. In just those few hundred years, it had spread literally around the known world, thanks to, again, the exploits of Alexander, thanks again to the design of God's creation. That's it for chapter 10.